Welcome to A Healthier, Happier You, the people working to make it happen. I'm Evan J. Cholfin from Luxhammer, where we help brands that help you live healthier. Today, we're talking with Teri-Ann Marchigiani, VP of Product Development at Tricoci. She's transforming how premium brands expand into new markets, and I'm excited to learn from her experience building successful product lines. Teri-Ann, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Evan. I'm excited to be here.
So, what's the story behind Tricoci's decision to expand into CPG products?
Tricoci has been around for 30 years, and with 13 locations of owned brick and mortar, it was kind of a no-brainer to expand into owned products. They always had their own private label line, and the board just saw a lot of value in being able to launch a brand incubator hub and really optimize our existing collections. The margins are very different in terms of service versus product, and when you have 13 owned stores, it just really creates a clear pathway of success for these brands to test, incubate, and all the things. So I think it was just a really big opportunity that they saw. And over the last 3 years, we've significantly grown their CPG division, which is really exciting.
What makes your approach to product development unique in the premium beauty space?
I think one big reason is credibility. When you're working for not necessarily a big conglomerate, but a very successful 30-year-old brand, we have a lot of credibility behind the brands that we're building, in addition to the professionals that we're able to tap into. So I would say the unique thing about being able to develop brand under Tricoci is the fact that I have 1,400 professionals from estheticians, stylists, colorists to help kind of facilitate that development. They are on the ground. They are using products every day, multiple brands. They know what works. They know what consumers want. And so it's just this really perfect innovation hub where, depending on what we're launching, I'm able to collaborate with these professionals to kind of help drive our decision making. So it's really just given us a leg up on credibility, as well as, a professional positioning on everything that we're doing, while we have a huge consumer testing base internally. So what brands are paying so much money to, whether it's test concepts, test products, we have that ground with not just our professional network of stylists, estheticians, and colorists, but also our consumer base. We're really able to get that real-time feedback on what works, what isn't working, what messaging is resonating. So it's just a really cool company to be a part of, to be able to expand innovation the way that we are.
So, where are you focusing most of your energy in product development right now?
It fluctuates. So over the last 3 years, the main focus was launching our first incubation brand, Nutrier. So Nutrier launched nationally just in January of this year, which is really exciting. It's been going so well. Sales are really consistent. Sales are very powerful. So the last 3 years was kind of incubating this brand, identifying the white space, which was backed by our salon credibility, and then really concepting that out all the way from formulas to packaging to branding to the name, and everything in between. So that was really where the last 3 years were spent. Now it's out, it's live. We're kind of monitoring anything from a developmental standpoint. Currently, as feedback comes in, we're also monitoring, branding and messaging that is really resonating with the consumer to then drive our innovation strategy. And now the big focus is we're launching a huge skincare line under Tricoci in June, and that is coming out of the gate with 11 SKUs. So as the developmental shift from building Nutrier the last 3 years, now I'm monitoring it. And now my real focus is launching a beautiful prestige skincare line that was directly developed with a great group of estheticians at Tricoci.
What's been working particularly well in your new product launches?
I think what's working really well in terms of Nutrier is how we disrupted a market that has existed for 30 plus years. There's been some disruption in the hair care space, but I think the way that Nutrier came to market, it was so relevant to the consumer today. And so I think that authenticity on it was just so simple, and it made so much sense, that has really resonated with the consumer. I think product development in itself and CPG is such a saturated space that when you're able to come up with something that's so authentic authentically simple that really resonates with the consumer, that's where you're going to find the most success. Nutria was incubated and it was just so natural. And I think that consumers can really see that and feel that when they're introduced to a new brand. You can't try too hard to force something to push it. And, so many people innovate and it's not necessarily innovation, but Nutria really was. We came in and we disrupted the hair care landscape as it lives today. And it was in a way that consumers are already used to shopping for their skincare, right? Consumers shop for skincare by their skin type. And so we've just applied those skin principles into hair care. And there was already this big shift of consumers wanting customization to really have healthy hair and not just mask it. And so that's what Nutria did. We disrupted a market in such a simple and natural way. And I do think that resonates and works really well for consumers. I think consumers nowadays are so knowledgeable, and I think that they just demand authenticity from brands along with efficacy, and are forcing brands to take accountability on the messaging that they're bringing forth and the products that they're bringing forth and the stories that come along with it. So I think that authenticity and simple disruption speaks volumes to a consumer nowadays.
So, what's been your biggest challenge in launching new product lines this year?
I would say the biggest challenge from a developmental standpoint is supply chain. It's very volatile. It has been ever since COVID. And so there's a lot of uncertainties in the market. Raw material costs have gone up. There's port strikes. And so hitting those timelines, I think, is a little stressful just because I think, again, that market is so volatile compared to how it was 5 years ago. And then I think internally is just getting the buy-in to ensure that, hey, we've come up with this. We've taken market trends. We've taken consumer data. We've really done our due diligence to bring this to life, really kind of convincing our investors that this is worthwhile. That's always a challenge, but I think anyone launching a brand or asking for any type of funding is going to come up against that. And then I would say thirdly is brand awareness. I think with any brand that's launching, even any existing brand, the single hardest thing to do is achieve brand awareness. It is most often the most expensive and the least measurable in terms of any KPI. Again, the market is so saturated that when you think of launching a new brand and you are up against about 500 other brands, how do you get that brand awareness without going through all of your funding? Customer acquisition costs online are so expensive. It's very competitive. You have about 2 seconds, maybe 3 seconds to try and capture consumer interest. And then, they get to the website and they don't convert. So I would say supply chain, very volatile, and customer acquisition costs and really driving that brand awareness is probably the most difficult when you are launching a new brand.
So, how do you address the brand awareness issue?
I think brand awareness for a new brand, it's really important to kind of go off of data. You can put together brand messaging, and as someone who is very siloed within the brand, it can make sense to you, and you're realizing that doesn't necessarily make sense to the consumer. So it's really being able to track all the progress through the marketing funnel on where are we getting people, where are they kind of floating off, where are they losing interest, how are we not, converting to sales. It's really assessing those data points to understand what messaging is resonating, where we can try and convince a potential customer to be loyal to Nutria or try Nutria. So I think it's still a work in progress. We've been technically nationally launched for 3 months, soft launched in September of last year. And it's still a work in progress on finding out that perfect messaging that's resonating. Maybe it's shifting the way that you're spending in your digital ads, as well as kind of building that credibility on social and influencer content. And influencer UGC is honestly, I think, one of the biggest driving factors that brands can reach, because you're not just utilizing some UGC content that is relatable and relevant to your potential consumer, but you're also able to reach their consumer base to help drive that awareness. So it's being flexible, and it's looking at data and looking at where the drop-off points are and seeing how can we shift this.
How are you working with influencers?
So we are utilizing influencers many different ways. We have our influencer marketing, which is just huge on social for Instagram, and then secondarily TikTok, because that's a very important social platform. So we will utilize influencers by They're doing educational content, showing how they're using the product, kind of talking through the benefits, how it fits into their routine, I think is so key, especially when you bring something so disruptive to the market. There's a level of education that comes along with it. So we're utilizing them for educational content, just introducing the brand, as well as just really great UGC content that resonates with people, whether it's really cool unboxings, whether it's, hey, I found this new brand, like, love the concept of it, and we're just trying to take that authentic approach to bring back the authenticity that the brand came to market with. So that's kind of how we're utilizing influencers right now.
How do you differentiate the products from others on the market?
Well, our packaging is very differentiated. We worked with established NYC in our packaging. They've done Rare Beauty, Fenty Beauty, Face Gym, and then our product positioning, like our segmentation of our brand is completely different to the current marketplace. Previously, shampoo, conditioner, hair care, it's done in duos. You have a hydrating shampoo, a hydrating conditioner. Nutrier, we've positioned it as you're going to shop for your shampoo based on your scalp type. Whether it's dry, oily, or already balanced, we're going to help alleviate those concerns and balance. And then we're going to have you shop for your conditioner based on your strand needs. So, right, thin, thick, damaged. So all in all, our packaging is very distinct. And then our product offering is just very different than what's on the landscape. I think that's why the brand is so disruptive. And when you are met with the brand and understand how to shop it, it's automatically just so different and distinct from anything that's on the market today.
That's great. So what are your main objectives for Tricoci's product lines in 2025?
Our main objectives, it's kind of different for each line. We have our private label hair care brand, which next year we are redesigning the entire portfolio to represent the segmentation that we put forth 2 years ago, which drives shoppability, tells a better story to the consumer. And so our goal there is to keep this consistent growth within Tricoci collection and possibly expand on, maybe it's an Amazon or maybe we go pro channel. Would love to see that for the Tricoci collection. In terms of skincare, I just want to continue to grow that within the salons as well and possibly explore going pro. And then for Nutrier, our huge objective is to get into retailers. So that's something that we are actively kind of working on and seeking, and that would be the end goal for Nutrier, is to do that. And then for Nutrier, in terms of innovating, we really want to do it slowly and meticulously and very thoughtful. So that would be our biggest objectives, is kind of growing them in the appropriate channels that they're set for and just driving more of that revenue.
So how are you thinking about distribution channels for your products?
Well, it really depends on the product positioning. So luckily, because I'm working with such a larger portfolio of 3 different brands, 2 of them are specifically more of like that pro private label. It's not going to be like your super luxury brand high price point, but it's still going to be elevated luxury prestige at an entry level price point. And so that's rooted in everything pro. We want to make sure that everything that we do for those lines represents the salon, the credibility behind the salons. And so an appropriate channel for that would be, of course, our own brick and mortar salons, and then potentially other salons, like being in a distributor such as Salon Centric or Cosmoprof, where other salons are able to buy our private label brands for Tricoci hair and Tricoci skin. And then we have, for Nutrier, again, that distribution, it was always rooted in our intention is to go into retailer. And so all decisions from packaging, naming, formula, everything was rooted in what is going to resonate at a retail shelf. So very different strategies, but very simple strategies just because of where the brands sit within the portfolio. We have our private label hair, we will have skin, and now we have our first incubation brand. And who's to say in 2 years we're not going to do another one? Any other brand that would come out of Tricoci again, outside of hair or skin, it would be for national or international distribution. So any brand that we incubate would definitely aim for retail distribution.
Can you talk about the incubation process and how that works?
Yeah. So I think launching a new department under an existing brand, it requires a mix of like strategic positioning, a lot of entrepreneurial flexibility, and kind of defining your why behind it. I think so many people launch products without knowledge or credibility on where they're playing. With the strategy on understanding, like, what credibility do we have as a team, as a brand, as a company? What space can we play in because of that credibility? And what kind of differentiates us? So, for example, consumer centric innovation. It is such a saturated market. And so to bring anything to market with not a compelling story that doesn't necessarily disrupt anything, it's probably not going to do great, right? Because consumers nowadays are so in the know, and there's so many brands that they are being introduced to that if there's a lack of authenticity and where it's coming from, it's just probably not going to resonate very well. So definitely consumer centric innovation. You really have to think about like brand DNA in your storytelling, a strong narrative to kind of start that incubation. Product excellence is like probably one of the very important factors. Again, going back to what consumers are looking for now, they are looking for authenticity from brands, and they are looking for products that perform. As again, with all the resources in the world on social, consumers are more in the loop about what's in their products, what they don't want in their products. And so you really have to be savvy on understanding like whoever your consumer base is that you've defined, that you are developing for their needs, that it is free of all the things they want it to be free of, and it performs phenomenally to help drive brand loyalty. Fourth, go to market strategy. This is huge. You should really carve out a lot of time to be able to craft a go to market strategy when you're incubating a brand. And whether you are a small startup or you're a bigger company, identifying the proper agencies and partners to help drive that is so key to the success of the brand. And then execution, right? From a development standpoint, supply chain. I, as a developer, am only as strong as my supply chain partners. If I want to move quick, I need to be able to have people around me who can execute on the level that I need them to execute in a quick manner. A stable supply chain is important. And then, of course, going back to that go to market strategy from a marketing lens and go to market, like having a very strong agency base to help execute things that like you're unable to execute on your own. Because often when you're incubating a new brand and you're a startup, you are a lean team. And so you really lean on those agency partners to help bring your message to the masses. And so that really has to be strong. So that would, I say, is like the framework for kind of building a CPG division.
Yeah, you mentioned the importance of storytelling. Maybe you could talk a little bit more about that.
Yeah, I think storytelling is important across all the brands. If you think of it from a product standpoint, when I think of storytelling from a product, it's the segmentation of the brand. It is the packaging. It is the name of the products. It is how it is merchandised. It is all the things on I'm telling a consumer a story when they are looking at me on shelf. And the whole point of that storytelling is to simplify the shopping experience for that said consumer. I'm sure you and I, as we are both consumers of any brands, there have been times where we have walked up to a shelf and have no idea how to shop a line. We have no idea to make sense of what the brand values are, what it stands for, why is this different, why do I want to shop it? And so storytelling from a product standpoint is, what is your line segmentation? What is your product architecture? One of the things from a product development standpoint is like product architecture, and I can compare it to like an architect building a home. An architect isn't going to start building a home without laying out a blueprint of how it's going to flow and how it's going to come to life, and that owner experience walking through the house. It is the same from a consumer lens. A lot of brands innovate to innovate and don't think about the big picture and the story that you are telling to the consumer. And so from a product standpoint, storytelling is basically setting up that blueprint before you are building that home, before you're building that product line. And then again, just very straightforward in terms of copy on packaging. Are the benefits clear? Is the why on why consumers want to pick this up clear? Because at the end of the day, merchandising on shelf should basically help a consumer shop the line and be very clear and articulate. In terms of storytelling for marketing, which is so important, is again, in a very saturated field where consumers are getting a million ads a day from different brands in different ways, how are you telling the story simply and quick to the point to drive awareness, to make them click to learn more about your brand, to then drive a sale? And so I think online storytelling is honestly one of the most difficult things that marketers have to deal with today. You have to be compelling, you have to be educational, and you have to be so concise in that messaging. And so it's really finding those 3 4 word statements that are compelling enough for a consumer to be like, this feels different, this is interesting, I like this. And so I think brand storytelling is something that will always be a work in progress, even on established brands. Consumers consume. They consume new brands. Brand loyalty is down, which means consumers are more willing to try different brands, whether they sometimes love a product or not, because there's so much new news. So how do you continue to shift that messaging for existing consumers to continue to generate their interest? Different storytelling, I think it's the key message here is like simplifying, concise, and just helping one shop to understand the benefits and like why I want to buy this.
What trends in premium beauty and personal care excite you the most?
I would say packaging. So I don't know if you've been noticing, but across the board, because now brands are again trying different ways to stand out, they're kind of innovating through packaging. And so there are these like really unique forms where brands are now investing in that custom tooling and custom forms to be more distinct from their competitors. And I love it. I think there's such a cool artistic factor to these prestige brands. They have the money to put behind the product, and I just love it. You often see trends really starting in the fragrance world. And now you're kind of seeing these really cool skincare and hair care products coming out with like artistic forms of packaging. For example, I mean, Nutrier is one with our sphere cap. It's so unique and so usable and so functional. Beyonce's Sacred, I mean, her packaging is also artful. And you're just seeing this uptick in branding through packaging, which is cool. And then honestly, personalization and like biotech driven formulas is probably my favorite thing. Again, the consumer demand for authenticity and efficacy in products is really forcing brands to genuinely take accountability for what they are producing and formulating. It's no more marketing levels of ingredients. It's no more of, oh, we're going to promise you the world and the product just doesn't perform. Like they don't want that. And so I truly love the consumer shift of demanding performance from these brands and authentic storytelling. And with that comes a concept of being able to like personalize something for the consumer. And again, that efficacy with any like biotech formulas, whether it's clinically tested ingredients or clinically tested formulas, is really exciting.
Yeah, definitely. So, how do you see the relationship between salons and retail products evolving?
Oh my gosh. I think that salons will continue to be a really important factor for product sales. And one of the reasons being is oftentimes when consumers are going to the hair salon, the products that are for sale are the ones that are being used. And if you think about the experience with a stylist, an esthetician, a colorist, or anyone of that professional manner, like that is a very intimate experience for the customer. And so there comes the opportunity to naturally educate on what products they're using, what's new in the marketplace, helping kind of diagnose those problems for the customers. And so it is just so important to the success of a lot of product lines. And it's just the perfect environment to allow that education, which is often the hardest thing to do, is educate a consumer and convince them why they need the product. And so I think that a salon atmosphere is so important and one that you're going to see these brands try to expand into because it really is just like the perfect segue. It's a retail environment, but it's more personal. I could walk into a Sephora and also today and sometimes be approached, but again, it can be so overwhelming that I don't even know where to start. And just that personalized approach that these professionals have behind the chair, behind their aesthetics beds, like they can understand what their customers are looking for. They can help solve those problems for them and walk them to the shelf and educate them. And I think education is the biggest takeaway here because if one is educated on something and the benefits of it and the problem it's solving, it's an easier thing to pick up for them. And so I just think it's so important. And I think that we're going to continue to see a lot of brands trying to play in that professional space.
So, what's going to be crucial to get right in your product strategy this year?
For Nutri, that's actually something that we're actively monitoring. I think what's crucial is, again, thinking about the product architecture. And I think Nutri is a prime example of this because being a new brand and disrupting the market as it lives today, We have to be really careful with how we're expanding our product. We've all agreed that we're not just going to innovate to innovate. We want to, so the goal will be this year is to really listen to the consumers. We also want to understand what products are resonating with them. Is it our scalp serums? Is it our shampoos and conditioners? What needs are we solving for them? What problems are we alleviating for them to help drive our innovation strategy? So that is the biggest goal of this year, is to listen to our consumer base, um, look at some really innovative ingredients that maybe we can consider while staying super true to our core assortment and having it be really complementary to our existing product line and staying consistent in the story that we're telling. Scalp and strand care, right? Two separate things. How do we expand it into product? So that'll be the biggest goal and objective this year, is to better understand the Nutria consumer to then help drive our innovation pipeline.
So, looking ahead to next year, what would make 2025 a success for Tricoci's product division?
I would say getting retail distribution and a big beauty retailer for sure. That would just make our year. I think it would really stamp our credibility even further on why we have the credibility to play in the space and do what we're doing now. That would be the cherry on top of next year.
That's great. Well, that's it for today's episode of Healthier, Happier You, the people working to make it happen. A huge thank you to Teri-Ann for sharing her insights into premium brand expansion and product development innovation. If you enjoyed this conversation, make sure to subscribe, leave a review, and share it with someone who'd benefit. If you're a brand or business making impact in health and wellness or personal care, we'd love to help you grow. Connect with me at luxhammer.com. Thanks for listening. Until next time, stay healthy, stay happy, and keep making a difference.
Thank you.